Hello, my name is Jenean Pretorius, and I am the acting lead for capacity strengthening at the Center for Learning on Evaluation and Results in Anglophone Africa, hosted by the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. In this video, I will discuss how monitoring and evaluation in climate change can be used throughout the program cycle. This is the third video in a series of 4 videos in which we are discussing monitoring and evaluation in climate action. In the first 2 videos, we discussed the importance of evaluative thinking to achieve transformational change and some of the tools that we use to generate evidence to support decision-making in climate action. The goal of this video is to explore the various phases of the program cycle and how the different types of evaluation fit throughout the cycle. I will start by defining what the program cycle is and how it represents the structure of decision-making that needs to happen before, during, and after an intervention is put into action. Then we will take a closer look at the various phases of the program cycle to understand what kinds of questions need to be answered in each of them and what kinds of tools we can use to reach these answers. This cycle is nothing more than a representation in stages of the entire decision-making process involving a program. This representation can take several forms. Here we choose to show this representation in 5 steps. These steps could have small variations, but the important thing is that we understand how monitoring and evaluation in climate action tools fit throughout these phases to generate evidence that will support the process of decision-making. During each stage of the project cycle, you can see in blue font examples of different M&A tools that can be used. And as you already know, we can categorize evaluations according to their timing. Ex-ante evaluations occur at the early stages of the program cycle. Using M&E in climate action during the problem identification and program design phases supports the effective design of interventions. Its purpose is to gather information and carry out analyses that help to define their objectives, to ensure that these objectives can be met and that the instruments used are cost-effective and that reliable later evaluations will be possible. As for ex-post evaluations, they take place later in the cycle during the implementation and evaluation phases, with the main goal of assessing the effectiveness of a program to understand its strengths and weaknesses in relation to implementation, results, and costs. Examples of ex-post evaluations include process evaluations, impact evaluations, and cost-benefit analysis. Let's take an example of an energy efficiency project funded by climate investment funds in Colombia. Phase 1, which is the problem identification. The electricity matrix is totally dependent on fossil fuels, notably diesel, in the 3 archipelagos in Colombia. Once the problem is identified and qualified with supporting evidence, we move on to phase 2, which is the program design. In this example, the intervention that was designed to deal with the problem of fossil fuel dependency was to invest in energy efficiency measures. We then move on to phase 3, which is implementation. And here, 3 things were advanced. Number 1, an energy demand management mechanism. Number 2, a social and sustainability plan. And number 3 is the installation of renewable energy sources. The idea is to increase the efficiency of current use, better plan for future uses, and diversify the energy matrix. Monitoring takes place mainly during implementation. Some indicators that can be used to monitor performance in this example are GHG emissions reduced and installed capacity of renewable energy. Fourthly, in the program evaluation phase, as you already know, different questions can be answered regarding the project's capacity to generate systemic change and to have the intended impacts. With the evaluation results, The stage of decision-making will be facilitated with results from evaluations to help define if the project can continue or if it needs to be reformulated. Going now through each phase of the project cycle in more detail, we begin with phase 1 of the problem identification. A project only exists to address a public problem, a social problem. A public problem is the difference between the situation we find ourselves in at a given moment and the situation that can be considered ideal in that context. The problem in this sense may appear suddenly, such as a natural disaster or a pandemic, or it may be the result of a situation that deteriorates over time until it becomes a problem for society. In the problem identification stage, it is important to define this problem very specifically. Think about what needs to be solved and think about what the root causes and the consequences are. The root causes are important because a project will need to act on the causes of a problem for it to be effective. We also think about the consequences because a problem is only actually a problem because it generates negative consequences for society. In the identification stage, we use evidence to define and identify the problem as specifically as possible. This is particularly important for two main reasons. The first is prioritization. There are several problems, and understanding the problem in detail helps us prioritize different public problems in the face of a restricted public budget, the scarcity of resources. And second, by identifying the problem in detail, the project will have a greater chance of success. If the problem is well identified and understood, it's possible to outline a logic for an intervention that actually solves this problem in the future. In our example of energy in Columbia archipelagos, the problem was 100% dependency of the energy matrix on diesel. Climate change is a complex issue driven by a multitude of factors, including, example, greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and industrialization. And within this context, we still need to be specific when defining the issue that demands action. While climate change is global and complex, we are required to act locally. And increasing the sources of renewable energy in 3 Colombian archipelagos is a very concrete way to act on what is possible at the local scale. Once we have a well-defined problem, we move on to the design phase, which is when all the planning must be carried out. It is at this stage that we'll think about tools such as the theory of change that will allow us to define the logic of the intervention, ensuring that the planned actions lead to products, results, and long-term impact. In the next and final video of this series, we will dive deeper into the process of developing a theory of change to support the design of a project and the choice of evaluation questions. In this sense, as mentioned in the previous video, it is important to use evidence. In our Columbia example, if the problem identified was the lack of access to electricity from renewable sources, one potentially important source of evidence is the lessons learned from external experiences. Other countries may have already developed projects to deal with this kind of issue, such as energy generation systems. So seeking information about these programs will help and can help to think about the design of the desired program, as well as how to evaluate it. Given the context of the archipelago, we may want to look at evidence of how island economies deal with the problem of energy generation and how they can make the most out of their natural resources, such as wind and solar, to generate energy. The implementation phase is when all that was planned during the program formulation is put into practice. It is when the planned actions are executed and the products are delivered. It involves the development of the details of the intervention to achieve the desired objective. During implementation, it is essential to generate evidence regarding whether and how program is being executed. This allows for identifying challenges, and process failures, enabling course corrections when necessary, as well as documenting successes to solidify and share good practices. It is during the implementation that monitoring takes place. So the indicators that were previously thought of in the formulation stage are monitored over time, allowing us to track changes, identify trends, and adapt the program as necessary. For instance, in the Columbia Energy Efficiency Project example, examples of indicators to monitor include measuring electricity consumption, the number of beneficiaries served with equipment replacements, and GHG emissions reduction. Another indicator that can be used is one that measures energy savings. It is also during implementation that we can perform process evaluations that provide answers to questions such as whether the goals are being achieved, what are the obstacles to implementation, etc., and to ensure that everything is implemented according to plan. After implementation, we move to the evaluation stage. Evaluation is here in a sense of assessing after the program is already implemented. Whether it has achieved the expected outcomes, whether it generated the planned impacts, and how these benefits compare to the costs that were incurred. For example, in the context of the Columbia Energy Efficiency Project, a cost-effectiveness assessment can quantify how much the investments made were able to generate in terms of the actual energy savings. And finally, we reach the decision-making stage. Although decisions have to be made throughout the entire life cycle of a program, this specific phase refers to decision in terms of its continuity. And so program management often must decide whether to continue and expand a program, reformulate it, or to discontinue it. So to make this decision in a well-informed manner, we must take into account the complete set of evidence generated throughout all of the M&E stages of the cycle. For example, the positive points that have been identified could be expanded to other contexts, while the negative points might demand partial redesign of the program. By considering all of the available evidence and reflecting on dimensions that signal transformational change, the decision to continue or expand the program, replicate it to other territories that share similar contexts, or even redesign or cancel it, will then allow the cycle to resume from the beginning. Thank you very much for listening, and please look forward to the next video, which will discuss the theory of change.